Hello, sports fans, and welcome to the Weekend Eve. I am Brian Kress, the Awesome Voice. This is Any Given Sunday on KUAW. Across from me is my brother with another mother and co-host of this phenomenal show, Coach 24, Darwin Penny. How are you doing, sir?
Doing well, voice. Glad to be here on the Thursday after championship weekend.
Absolutely. Running the show and behind the scenes, Mr. DJ Scatter, George Walker. How are you doing, sir?
We're doing just fantastic this evening.
That is awesome. Awesome to hear. And we have a guest tonight, Mr. Jimmy Ross. He is the owner of the Kansas City Panthers and the CMFL, which is Central Midwest Football League, the semi-pro football league. So very nice to have you on our show tonight.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
And we will we're going to talk a little bit about the AFC, NFC games, somebody retiring, and we are going to talk about the semi-pro league and how it runs. So so let's get started. The AFC, NFC. So we're going to do the NFC game. You had predicted San Francisco. You thought that their defense and their offense would have played enough. What we didn't know was that Brock Purdy would tear his ligament in his elbow and wouldn't be able to throw another pass. And then to complicate things, the Tim Johnson, the backup quarterback, also got injured, so he had to go back into the game without being able to throw a pass. So if I told you that Brock Purdy had thrown 100% completions in the beginning of the game and at the end of the game, and he was 100%, you would have thought San Francisco would have just blown away Philadelphia.
Yeah, we certainly haven't seen anybody be that hot in a championship game, whether it be a conference championship game or if it was a Super Bowl. Certainly we remember Phil Simms when he was 22 out of 25 in Super Bowl 20, and it was an outstanding performance. And so it was certainly an unforeseeable set of circumstances. Most people only carry two quarterbacks active on the roster, and so does somebody need to carry three quarterbacks on the roster for a championship game? I'm sure if San Francisco had to do it all over again, they probably would have dressed out a third quarterback that day. But with limited roster spots, every spot counts, and especially to have a spot for somebody who can't play special teams for you. Most of the time you've got an extra defensive back or receiver or linebacker, somebody who's that extra guy who's going to take up that roster spot. Unfortunate circumstances, because when we go into these games, we want to see both teams at full strength go out and play. And so with us not having one team at full strength, and then it became a mockery, especially when at one point in time it was a 14-7 game when Christian McCaffrey makes his tremendous run to get into the end zone. But when you can't move the chains because you're limited and you can't throw the ball, it put a damper on what could have been a very competitive game. We were able to see a team that was just decimated because then it extended the amount of time that Philadelphia controlled the ball. They had the ball for a whole quarter more than the 49ers, and so you just can't leave your defense out there all day, no matter how good they are. Eventually they're going to tire out, and what we saw was a team to get frustrated late in the game because they know they didn't want their season to come down and we don't have anybody to play quarterback. We've got to put Christian McCaffrey back there, or we've got to put a quarterback where they know he cannot throw the ball. And even as creative as Kyle Shanahan is in the run game, there's not enough creativity where you could just sit up there. This is not high school football or college football where you can just run the ball every play down somebody's throat. And so our hats still go off to the Eagles, because when we cut through the chase, the Eagles have been the most consistent team in the league all year.
Yep.
And so they deserve to be in the Super Bowl. We just would have liked to see it at where both teams were at full strength.
Absolutely. And I completely agree with that. Now, saying this, Jerry Jones had mentioned something during the week that they should have an emergency quarterback. they should have a roster open for an emergency quarterback. What do you think on that?
Well, I think that you have to make that decision as a organization, as a franchise, as to how many quarterbacks you're going to dress out for a game. Your third quarterback gets all of his reps as a scout team guy during the week, and so you've got to make that decision, or you've got to train up somebody else that's going to be competent to be back there. I don't think that you have an emergency spot where you're going to bring somebody down out of the locker room and tell them to get their uniform on. You make that decision on how many quarterbacks you want to dress out for the game. You've got 3 guys, maybe even a 4th guy that you could dress out for the game. And I just think in a championship level game like this, maybe that's the decision that you have to make. And so whatever it is, you have to go with that decision once you make it. But I don't think there should be a special spot for an emergency quarterback when you're given a number of here's your roster number, and you choose who you dress out.
Right. And I completely agree with that. You have these certain spots. I mean, look at the Chiefs. You could say, well, they didn't have extra defensive backs because they were dropping, and the wide receivers, they were dropping. But that's the name of the game. It's unforeseen circumstances, but that's how the game is played.
Right. I'd be more open to saying that we're going to expand the rosters, not have just one spot.
Right.
For one position.
Right.
Because, like you said, that could be any position. Right. We've seen games where a team was down, like they don't have any more defensive backs. I watched my Cowboys earlier this year on the game where Anthony Brown tore his Achilles. Okay, 2 more guys get hurt, and then all of a sudden you're down to your last corner. Now you're going to have to put a safety at corner, right? Yep. And so that's the breaks. So I'd be more apt to say, well, we're just going to expand the roster by one more than to say, no, you got an emergency situation there, or whoever that kid is. Everybody's got somebody on their team that played quarterback in high school.
Exactly.
Right,
exactly.
Whether they're a wide receiver, defensive back, somebody that played quarterback in high school, and you always prepare for the unforeseen.
Right.
Every coach does it every week when you're getting ready for a game. I certainly have not coached at the professional level, but I have been a head coach at the high school level, and it was always, what's the worst possible scenario that could happen to us? And especially if I had a kid that maybe he just got a cold, I'm always telling somebody to get extra snaps. And it even happened to me when I was a junior high kid, right? I played running back and receiver, and then we only had one fullback. And my coach says, who knows the fullback plays? I say, I do. First series, fullback twists his ankle, and I play fullback the rest of the game, scored a touchdown.
Nice.
There you
But
go.
it was all about just because he said – and we were on the bus driving over there. Who knows the fullback position? Because our backup fullback was sick.
Right. Well, like we were talking last week, that's what Andy Reid does.
Yeah.
Andy Reid practices. Okay, this guy is out. This guy is out. You guys go in. Mahomes is injured. So Chad Henne comes in. Wide receiver, a lineman, they're out. He prepares them. Now, like I said, I don't know what the other teams do, but I imagine they are. They're professionals, so they do that. But Andy Reid makes sure that their team is completely paired. And the AFC game was very proof of that because he kept losing players left and right. The only 2 injured players that he still had available was Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes. And you really couldn't afford to lose them. But if you lost Patrick Mahomes, Chad Henne could come in and step in. And Travis Kelce, you had Noah Gray and Bell. And so you have to prepare for stuff like this because you would like to think all 53 players are healthy and all play. But as they said, you're going to get hurt through the season. When you make the playoffs, you are not 100% anyway.
Right. The hard part for the 49ers is everybody knows Brock Purdy was their 3rd guy on the season, right?
Yes.
He's their 3rd guy. Okay, Gerard Johnson is the 4th guy, right? So very few teams go through that many injuries at quarterback.
Right.
And I don't know that you can adequately prepared, but you always have an emergency. If this goes bad, you got an emergency kicker, right? Few years ago, Cowboys are playing punter and kicker get hurt,
Right.
and the safety who had kicked in high school, he all of a sudden now has to kick extra points.
Right. And who's going to hold the ball?
Right. Everybody prepares for it. Now, every quarterback probably knows how to
Right,
that,
exactly.
or you've got one receiver who, okay, he's my emergency guy here.
Right. But
Right.
you don't want a Dak Prescott. You don't want a Patrick Mahomes out there holding the ball.
You really don't, but there was a time when quarterbacks used to do that.
Len Dawson
Yes.
did.
Right? Quarterbacks used to do that. One of the most famous games in Cowboys history is the fumble by Romo
Oh,
in
yes.
the Seattle game,
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
And everybody says, why is he out there? Well, prior to him becoming the starter 6 games into the season, he had been the holder, and he stayed the holder the rest of the year, even as the
Right.
starting quarterback.
Right.
But one time he fumbles the ball, and that's what
Yep.
everybody remembers. Why is he in it? He's been the holder all year.
Right.
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 Most people now, it's the punter winds
Right.
up being the holder, and that's the way it is. But injuries are a part of the game. There's not anything that you really can do about it. You see starting quarterbacks go out, backup comes in. But I bet, we've probably – I can't remember the last time that you actually got to your third
Right.
to your fourth quarterback in a season just because of injuries, right? No trades, no anything like that. You bringing in a guy who you could tell he really wasn't ready to play. He's having communication issues with his helmet, everything else.
Yep.
And then on top of that, then he winds up with a concussion.
Right. And then the one time he didn't totally, completely focus, he lost the ball.
Oh, yep.
And when
That changed the
happened,
game.
It did. It did, because 14-7, San Francisco's defense is still so solid that they could stay out there. But once it went 21-7, in my opinion, it was over, because now they have to score 2 touchdowns.
Well, the only reason why it wasn't over for me at that point, because I've always held with 2 evenly matched teams, if it's 14 points or less at halftime, the team that scores 4 first in the second half will win. They were getting the ball first, and so if you get the ball, you drive it down there, you score, all of a sudden it's a one-possession game again. So I didn't think it – but I'm like, if the Eagles score first, it's definitely over.
Right.
And obviously that's what happened. But it was a huge, huge momentum shift because they were getting back in the game.
Right. They were
Right.
actually making some plays. They
Right.
were moving the ball. Now, they wasn't moving it all the way down, but they were moving the ball enough to make a significant chance that they can get back into the game.
Because you say if they do, they go down there, McCaffrey was starting to find his groove, and let's say they do go down there and they tie it up. It's game on.
Right.
Right. But
Oh, yeah.
instead of being down 1 score, you're down 2, and the defense was unable to hold them out of the end zone, or maybe just hold them to a field goal there.
Right. Well, and to be honest, if it was a Kansas City type defense, it could put you back in the game. But Philadelphia's defense, and they were just going after full-fledged after the quarterback.
Oh, absolutely.
And
rightfully so. That's
right.
what you
And
do.
so with you as a coach, this is semi-pro, but when you have a situation like that, don't you take full advantage of that?
You have to, because there's so many variables in football anyway. Ball bounce funny, this, that, the other. So you have to take advantage of the opportunities that's given to you. And some people look at it as, okay, well, they're being unsportsmanlike, they're running the score up or whatever like that. But no, it's not over until that last second ticks off.
Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of comebacks on every
Chargers,
level.
Chargers in Jacksonville is the
Yes.
best example.
Absolutely. When I was a high school coach, my junior high coaches would come and be on the sidelines. I had one guy, he was assigned to anything that's different with them, right? If the other team's cornerback goes out, his job was to say, hey, we got a backup at left corner, right?
Yes.
It's his job to say, hey, we got a backup at left corner, because those of us who are coordinating or leading, we're focused on our sideline, but I always have one guy that's focused on the other team's sideline.
Right. Absolutely. So
But that's taking advantage of what's, because we got a new corner in,
Yeah.
Hey, we want to throw the ball right there as soon as he gets in the game.
Right.
Yes.
So,
Okay, or run at him.
right.
You know.
So San Francisco lost their opportunity. I have a little bit of empathy, but if it was the other way around, they would have taken full advantage of Jalen, because Jalen Hurts has been injured. He wasn't 100%. Knock him out and bring in Minshew, and it could have been the exact same thing.
It's been like this throughout football, right? So we go back to 1989, going into 1990. 49ers have won 2 straight Super Bowls, or working on a third one, and Montana gets knocked out in the NFC Championship game.
Yeah.
It maybe changes the course of history.
Right.
We don't know.
Right.
Could have been maybe the first team to win 3 in a row.
Right.
So things like that happen. And so you've got to have somebody come in as a capable backup. We've seen backups lead teams to championships.
Yeah.
Right? Jeff Hostetler.
Earl Morrall.
Earl Morrall, the Dolphins' undefeated year, quarterback the Dolphins all the way up into the playoffs. Right?
The Kansas City Chiefs' first Super Bowl, or first Super Bowl victory. Flores was the backup quarterback for Lynn Dawson. He was out for a while. So it happens. So, like you said, you got to just take advantage and be prepared, like Boy Scouts, be prepared.
Right. And that's why you see teams sometimes will invest a lot of money into a veteran backup.
Right.
It was always my thought process is the most important person on my team was my backup quarterback. Right?
Yeah.
It is from the old movie from Remember the Titans. Can't make that pitch. He says, you ain't gonna never play anyway.
Yep,
but it
exactly.
is Sunshine who leads them to the championship. And so I would always be on my backup quarterbacks about doing their due diligence, even though you think you're a sophomore and you might not get in the game. And I used to challenge my offensive coordinator to put them in the game before the game was out of hand, so that their heart could race and know what it's like. Let them play some meaningful downs in the game. If it's just one series in the first half, I wanted them to feel the pressure of being in the game, because those guys got to stay ready.
Right, exactly. And so when Chad Henne came in at the 2-yard line,
Absolutely.
And goes 98 yards, which is the longest that a backup quarterback entering a game drove for a touchdown. That was huge, because who knows? It could have been Cincinnati at home against Jacksonville. So, and it's all that. And so we go to the AFC Championship game. Patrick Mahomes was injured all week. He was not going to be 100%. You think Cincinnati was boo-hooing? They were boasting. They were, they had their mayor shooting his mouth off, thinking about how. And here was the funny thing, they were talking about the name, not Arrowhead, but the other. But he had only won one time at Arrowhead. It wasn't like he won a string of games like Tom Brady would. It was one time, and, they were shouting it out. But, Cincinnati had the Kansas City's number. But when you talk to a champion and you dog them like that, they don't forget. And they made sure that, and I never at one point thought that Kansas City was going to blow them out. I knew it was going to be a 3-point game. He knew it was going to be a 3-point game. And it took a couple of plays. Now, the one play that everybody is talking about, Patrick Mahomes going out of bounds, and I have a problem with one of the women reporters. I was listening to Around the Horn, and she was saying that he was 15% out of bounds. I have saw pictures. I've saw the video, the replay hundreds of times. I don't know where she got her math from, but it was not 15%. He was completely 3 steps out of bounds when he hit it. Now, I feel bad for him because he played phenomenal all game. He was Kansas City's thorn.
Look,
But
I'm sorry. Go
no,
ahead,
no,
bro.
go ahead. But
No, I was going to say, I was talking with someone else about that the other day, and I said, look, the game goes so fast. And there's been many a times where players pull up and they think that a quarterback is going to go out, and the quarterback don't. He puts his foot down and he goes. That young man that hit Patrick out, yes, it was wrong. Chiefs got awarded for it, but at the same time, I'm sure that young man was not looking at the stripes.
Right.
He just wanted to put hands on him.
Right.
And so,
Right.
Yeah, it's one of those situations you're playing as hard as you can.
yes.
Right. And you lose a little bit of perception of where you are on the field. What I thought was that his teammate was going to basically block him from hitting because there's a teammate that's right there in front of. He's the one that pulls up. This guy's hustling, and right, and it is. I've been in those situations because those guys are trying to get that extra yard, or they're trying to sneak the ball out one more foot or whatever. And so, but it's one of those that you got to kind of know where you are on the field. I don't fault the guy for playing hard.
No,
There's
not
nothing
at all.
malicious in it, but it was a foul.
It was.
It was a foul. It was clear, and you have to call it. There's no way. What I say to anybody who thinks it's wrong, tell me how is it a no foul?
Exactly.
You can't.
There's no way you can say
can't.
it's a no foul.
Right.
There's no way as an official you can swallow your whistle there.
No.
Right. No.
Right.
You couldn't.
Because it was too far out. Now, if it would have been inbounds and he pushes him, and you make it swallow and say that's not unnecessary roughness.
Right.
But once he, as the quarterback, or even if it's not Mahomes, if
Right.
it's any player,
Right.
right? And I think that's what most people get. Well, they protect the quarterback too much. That's a foul on any player. That's a foul if it's a guard.
Right.
Right.
And it's been like that for over 30 years. It wasn't like they just made this rule
Right.
last year, like the overtime rule.
Right. The only thing that's changed is how you go out of bounds as to whether they keep the clock running or not.
Right.
True.
Right. If you're not going forward,
Right.
okay, when you go out, now the clock continues to run.
Exactly.
I'm not a fan of that rule.
Right.
I'm like, me getting out of bounds is me getting out of bounds. Why?
I agree.
Right.
Right.
But that is the rule.
Right.
Right. And so that's what the guy who was in front of Mahomes was saying is
Right.
that if I could get his momentum going backwards, then the clock doesn't stop.
Right.
And that's what this guy tried to say, but you were in a trail position. The only guy who really had a chance was the player who was in front of him who chose to pull up.
Right. And you're looking at a guy who normally does run out of the necessity of doing that, but he has been injured all game. He had been limping around. He didn't want to run at all.
Yeah,
and
he-
that was one of those ones where he needed to get, he was making a play. But he wasn't going to go up the field. He just wanted
Not
to get
the
it up,
distance,
get it out and
anyway.
down. There was a little bit of time and hopefully be able to make another play so the kicker could get, because he knew getting out of bounds right there, Buckhurt probably was not going to make that kick. That was too cold, and he hadn't.
It's out of his range at that point.
Right.
Okay, you're looking at a miracle kick at best, right?
55, 60 yards.
At minimum, right?
Right.
So, and with those cold temperatures and everything, you're asking a lot, right?
Exactly.
But the other thing is how far can I get down there? Even if we can't get a kickoff, we want to be close enough to where we can do a Hail Mary.
Absolutely. So, because everybody was expecting overtime, and then as soon as they threw the flag, oh, you can't do that. Well, he did, and it happened, and you just got to deal with it.
Right. Here's always been the policy, whether it's in any sport. Everybody wants to see the players make the plays, right? They don't want it to come down to an official's call.
I totally agree with
right,
that.
everybody
Right.
agrees with that. But as an official, I'll say it again, you cannot swallow your whistle in a situation where player safety is involved or it is just blatant.
Well, in a sense, if he doesn't call it, it's still the officials dictating the game. So you can't say that. So saying that, we've made history. 2 black quarterbacks starting in the NFL. I'm wearing my Doug Williams jersey because 35 years ago, Doug Williams became the first black quarterback to start a Super Bowl. And he was 1 for 1, which is awesome. here's the other thing. He almost did a Patrick Mahomes, because in that game, he got his knee bent back and he was almost knocked out of the game. But he came back in, down 10-0, turns around, scores 35 points in the second quarter, and then the game is done over with. So
Absolutely. I do want to add that both of those quarterbacks are from the state of Texas.
yes, they are. Yes.
That's what you call grit.
Yeah.
And that's what I saw out of the Chiefs in this last game was grit. That's what I was waiting to see was the grit. Yeah.
And see, you didn't see that last year, and you really didn't see it against Tampa Bay. They were flashy. They were the St. Louis Rams of '99. They, teams like that, and they gutted it out. People were like, "Well, you probably thought they were going to slaughter them." No, I did not. I knew that the Chiefs were in for a battle. The Chiefs knew that they were in for a battle.
Absolutely.
But yet, and it shows how misery loves company. Negativity is such a strong thing, because I could do everything perfect, and you two could find probably so-called you two would find something wrong. That's the majority of the people. No matter how good I do something to help people or whatever, you will find something wrong, because that's the mindset of society. And that's why I struggle with this, because look, I think what's going on is awesome. 2 black quarterbacks. But why are we waiting until 2023 to celebrate it? We should have been doing this long ago.
Well, we had to the sport had to evolve too, because for too long the African American quarterback, as he was coming out of college, was then forced to fit a style, a prototypical, versus saying we're going to take what you do best and we're going to create an offense that goes along with that. Okay, we're going to allow you to be you instead of trying to put the round peg into the square hole. And so until we got to that level at the collegiate level where the pool was more saturated with African-American talent at the position, you weren't going to get to where you are today, to where we're not that far. We still may be another decade where it won't even be brought up that they're African-American, that they'll just be quarterbacks. And that's what Doug Williams wanted back then. I just want to be a quarterback. Right. I don't want to be a black quarterback. I just want to be a quarterback.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I was a fan of his.
But we are, make no mistake about it, this is historical, because we had a game with 2 African-American coaches in the Super Bowl.
Yes.
Right. And so to get to this point shows that there is progress being made in the league,
right,
except for in 2 areas, right? Head coach and general managers.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. And for that part, at some point in time, ownership. Right? There's going to have to be some evolution there.
Right.
So, but it's historic to see these young men. But it's because the NFL was finally willing to adjust their style of play to fit the talent of this quarterback, instead of saying, no, we're going to make you fit this. And because it ruined so many quarterbacks along the way, right? The Vince Youngs and guys like that. Well, all the stuff that Lamar and these guys are doing, Vince Young was doing that in 06.
Randall Cunningham.
Right? These guys were doing that, but they said, no, you're going to come in and you're going to fit this type, right? And then you're going to be a guy that maybe you go through 2 or 3 different head coaches or offensive coordinators that really don't want you. And I'll lean back to Vince Young in particular, but Mahomes got to come into the best possible situation he could come into.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Now I think this young man would be great no matter what.
Right.
But he didn't have to go and lift a 1-15 team.
No.
You got arguably one of the greatest coaches, arguably one of the greatest play callers ever as your head coach. He got to sit for a year, which quarterbacks used to get a chance to do before having to do that, and it's an already ready-made playoff team. And so you traded in the sedan for the Ferrari. I mean, at the end of the day. And now what you see Jalen Hurts over this last year, you saw a young man say, I've got to get better. Okay, you see a young man who's gone through adversity. Here he was, a starting quarterback at Alabama, get replaced by Tua, right?
Yep.
He didn't pout.
Nope.
Okay. When they called on him, he performed well, but then he had to make a decision, and his decision, like, I really want to continue to compete. I'm not mad at Tua, but I'm going to take my talents elsewhere to Oklahoma. He did a great job there.
Yep.
How many people have you ever heard talk about Jalen Hurts and say that's a coach's kid?
Never.
And he is. But we hear that all the time about Anglo quarterbacks. Oh, he's smart. He's a coach's kid. Guess what? Jalen Hurts is. He's a coach's kid. Channelview, Texas.
And see, and that goes back to the tunnel vision of people, because Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, I mean, his father was a great quarterback. But if Jalen Hurts had a father that was a quarterback, you wouldn't have heard of that, because he was they were verily out at that time. So, but I really appreciate Jalen Hurts, because he is that type. He doesn't talk, he doesn't, he's not boisterous where he, like a Baker Mayfield. He was silent. He was a strong leader. Baker Mayfield was never a leader. Patrick Mahomes is doing the exact same thing. He is a leader. Even Joe Burrow is a leader. But, you got Patrick, you've got, and even to a point, Lamar Jackson. The problem with him is that his abilities are getting him hurt, and he's not available for when Baltimore needs him, which was the last 2 years, the last part of the season. But I applaud the fact that there are two black quarterbacks. I'm just glad that, and I don't want to say it at that, those are the two best quarterbacks in the league. They're not the two best black quarterbacks in the league. They are the two best, period. Chiefs were number one in the AFC. Philadelphia was number one in the NFC. Case closed. And that's how I feel about that.
I'm not going to take anything away from, yes, it's a celebration to have two great men, ball players, black quarterbacks in the Super Bowl.
Right.
But, I always think big, Brian. I'm waiting to see that day when there's black ownership in the NFL.
Absolutely.
So,
and that's me. My opinion is, if you are the, here's the best example. Michael Jordan. He was the best in the game. Now he's got now he's ownership of a team. Good for him, because he earned it. The problem is blacks don't get that opportunity. And that is sad, because Ozzie Newsome was the best GM the past 20 years. Like I said, I was doing the quiz. Ozzie Newsome led Baltimore to 2 Super Bowl championships, which are their only 2 championships. And he brought in players. He's had, brought in Ray Lewis, Jonathan Ogden, all these players, and they made it to the Hall of Fame. Why, if you were a blind man, why can't you just see the person for who they are and not because of what they look like?
Right. Well, it is, again, it's a continued evolution. We've got to work toward that. Nothing happens overnight. Sometimes we do look at it and say, what's the problem? I look at the situation with the Chiefs with Eric Bieniemy. He's interviewed 15 times for head coaching jobs. He still doesn't have a head coaching job. And we see guys come from the booth, like Jeff Saturday, with all due respect to him,
Right.
and he gets a position, and now you got the owner who really wanted to make him the full-time coach, but got a lot of pushback.
Right.
And so you say everybody just wants to be treated fairly, equally. I want to have the best opportunity, but everybody else who's been right there side by side with Andy Reid's gotten a head coaching job. Why hadn't this guy gotten a head coaching job?
Exactly.
So
with that, we are at halftime on Any Given Sunday on KUAW. Coach 24, Darwin Penny, our guest, Jimmy Ross, George Walker, and I am Brian Cressy, Austin Wars. We're going to take a break, and then we'll come back in the second half of Any Given Sunday.
We're shining a long overdue spotlight on the hidden figures of untaught history who deserve to be celebrated for their contributions to civil rights, politics, the arts, and beyond.
The Tuskegee Airmen were black servicemen of the United States Army Air Forces who trained at Tuskegee Army Airfield in Alabama during World War II. They constituted the first African American flying unit in the United States military. In January of 1941, the War Department formed the all-black 99th Pursuit Squadron of the United States Army Air Corps. Later, the Army changed its name to United States Army Air Forces. In January of 1941, the War Department formed the all-black 99th Pursuit Squadron of the United States Army Air Corps. Later, the United States Army Air Forces, to be trained using single-engine planes at the segregated Tuskegee Army Airfield in Tuskegee, Alabama. The NAACP, the black press, and others had been lobbying hard for the government to allow African Americans to become military pilots. However, neither the NAACP nor the most involved black newspapers approved the solution of creating separate black units. They believed that approach simply perpetuated segregation and discrimination. Nevertheless, largely at the behest of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, a separate unit was created. The Tuskegee base opened on July 19th, and the first class graduated the following March. Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Oliver Davis, Jr. was the squadron's commander. The Tuskegee Airmen received further training in French Morocco before their first mission on June 2, 1943. Later that year, the Army activated 3 more squadrons that joined in 1944. Altogether, 992 pilots graduated from the Tuskegee Airfield courses, and they flew over 1,500 missions and over 15,000 sorties, destroyed 261 enemy aircraft, and won more than 850 medals.
You're invited to celebrate Black History Month with TNCRadio.live. We're shining a long overdue spotlight on the hidden figures of untaught history who deserve to be celebrated for their contributions to civil rights, politics, the arts, and beyond.
The Tuskegee Airmen were black servicemen of the United States Army Air Forces.
All right, we're back for the second half of Any Given Sunday. I am Brian Kress, the awesome voice. Across from me is Coach 24 Darwin Penny. Behind the scenes, running the show, DJ Scatter, George Walker, and Jimmy Ross, our guest tonight. So real quick, before we get into the Panthers and the semi-pro, Darwin went 8-4 in predictions in the playoffs. I went 9-3. Everybody else, Emmanuel Sanders went 11-1, and the only one he lost was he picked Cincinnati to beat Kansas City. So we did a phenomenal job of predicting. So we should be on NFL Network doing this. So now we are here with Jimmy Ross. Now he is the owner of the Kansas City Panthers. He used to be a player, a running back, back in the day. He is also the owner of the league, the Central Midwest Football League. And for some reason, I always want to say Missouri, Central Missouri, but it's Central Midwest Football League.
Well, I'm not the sole owner of the league. I'm the sole owner of the Panthers.
Right.
I'm co-owner of the league. My partner is Zach Dabney, but I take the president title, and he has the vice president title.
Absolutely. So, saying this, how long have you been associated with the league that you're in now?
Well, the league itself is going into its 10th year. I've been associated with the league for 9 years, and I've owned the league for the last 4 years. So, and my Panthers team, I've owned it for 27 years.
Right. And before that, you were a running back. Now, were you a running back for the Jazz, Kansas City Jazz, or who was the team again that you had played for? Tell us a little bit about.
Yeah, back in '95, the Kansas City Jazz was on the scene, and the Missouri Bulldogs, Independence Bulldogs. I played for the Jazz in '94, and then '95 I played for the for the Independence Bulldogs. And then in '96 is when I started the Panthers.
Absolutely. So now I've been your announcer. I've been your center. I have been your coach. I have done everything that you've needed to do to help the team. And it's not about me. I just love football so much that I wanted to do whatever it took to do that. But saying that, I am your best hiker. I will always be your best hiker. So, but saying that, from the time that I started, roughly about 15 years ago to now, what has been the improvements? What is the changes of improvements that has gone in the 15 years?
For the team or for the league?
Both.
I'll start with the team first. The first thing that I needed to do was strengthen up my coaching staff. Okay. So ball players that played for me in the past, I've been very successful in getting those guys to come on board as coaches. So they already know exactly my philosophies and what I will and will not do. And also, too, they know exactly how the workings of semi-pro ball and the travel and the grind and all that. So that helped. And even after this season, I've even increased my coaching staff. I think we're up to 10 coaches right now. So that's going to be huge because then we have eyes everywhere now. And you need that for football. Recruiting, getting ball players out there. I'm the type of person that just because you're playing on a different team, we're not enemies when we're out on the streets.
Right.
So I will support you and I will cheer for you even though that you're on another team. A lot of guys, I think that down the road, when the opportunity for those guys to make a move or to talk to them, I've already established that relationship with them and knowing that, hey, it's not just about football. Hey, I really and truly indeed invested in care about your well-being as far as your personal life. And my ball players that are with me go out and they share that same information to other people and they help with the recruiting part of it.
Right, absolutely. So when this league, roughly 10 years ago, started, there was only, what was there, about six
teams.
6 teams. Now, how many teams do you have now?
Currently, right now, we are up to 15 teams.
And are they just in the Missouri-Kansas area?
We got teams in Iowa, Nebraska, St. Louis, Kansas City, Wichita, Kansas, Joplin, Missouri, Arkansas, Illinois.
Tulsa?
Yes, Tulsa. Don't let me leave out Tulsa. Tulsa Gators.
Absolutely. So what did it take for you to be able to expand out there? Because, like I said, I've been with you for 15 years, and we were just in a little small area, but now you have really expanded out. What did it take for that to happen?
I've been in this for so long, so I know people. When I was a player and when I first started out, I made a lot of mistakes early on. And in the past, semi-pro had developed a negative, reputation. So the first thing that I did was try to start getting the teams that's in my league to function the same. It's about doing the little things right. Okay. And then you have to stand on your word. If you say that we're going to put these rules in place, then you have to be willing to go ahead and, regardless of who it is, and stand on those rules. And that's what I managed to do. Also, too, I think what helped, when we had COVID, we played. Okay. We couldn't get facilities. A lot of the teams either play at college stadiums or they play at high school stadiums. So I was meeting with all the teams at that time and asking them, how is your city operating? How is your town operating? Okay, how's the state operating? And then at the very last minute, I said, okay, they're kind of operating similar. And I said, let's put all the teams in parks. And that was when they said, okay, well, you can be outside, but you just can't be inside. And none of the schools were running their facilities. A lot of other leagues had decided to go ahead and shut down. And because that we decided to go ahead and move forward and all the teams played at parks that one year, the fan base picked up. People loved it and they were happy. And we shortened the season too because we got it in there. And then at the very end, I was able to shout out to Olathe for allowing us to have the championship game out there.
If there was obviously there are a lot of misnomers when it comes to semi-professional sports, whether it's football or basketball, baseball, whatever. If you could share with our audience a misnomer or two that you say these things are not true about our sport, and how would you recruit me to want to come out and see your product?
Well, if you came to me and said that you'd have to give me a reason why what you've heard, and I can answer that.
Cutthroat. It's a cutthroat league, and the players aren't very good.
Well, that's a matter of opinion because I can actually show you footage on some of the teams that actually played and how we've played in our league. Matter of fact, we had two teams. The Missouri Cyclones won the championship in our league out of St. Louis, Missouri. They're back-to-back champions. They had gotten an invite to go play in the Nationals in Florida. The Tulsa Gators just joined our league, but they came from another league, and they had gotten the invite. So basically, I had two teams go to Florida recently and play in the Nationals. Okay.
Now, who sanctions this national tournament or national game?
There's multiple national games, and of course, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of teams throughout the country. And all of them aren't created equal, just like all the leagues aren't, okay? But the USA Bowl was who reached out to those two teams. And they're not just going to reach out to a troublesome team. They've had their eye on them, and then those teams won their leagues, and so they got the invite. They look good from head to toe. Their attitude on the field was great. Everything. If anything, like I said, it was a proud moment for me to have two of my teams go, and I'm sure we'll have another team go next year.
What is the median age for players on your roster?
It's starting to get a little younger. Now it's starting to be, I would say, probably the average age is 23 to 25. My starting quarterback was 21 last year. Okay. And love the kid. And I've had a lot of rookies on my team. We had 30 rookies on our team last year. I rebuilt the team. And that's the thing. Some people just don't fit. And you have to go out and get new. I'm not afraid to play new guys. I had 8 veterans. And when the previous season ended, I told my 8 veterans that, hey, I'm going to build this team around you guys. And they said, let's do it. And I brought them 30 rookies in, and then we turned around, and we're tied for first place in our conference. At the end, now we wind up getting a 3rd seed, but it came down to points against what put us in the 3rd place. But to go 5-3 was phenomenal for a team that everyone thought was going to be at the bottom. But like I said, our league and the way that I run my team is uniformity, okay? The rules may hurt a little bit when we started adding more rules, and each year we always do. And we see what works and what don't works. But how can we get to the point of having corporate sponsors if we're not able to look the same across the board? Okay. There's been some negative connotation with some of the other leagues and some of the teams in other cities where there's been fights and so on like that. Well, one of the things that I did was to make sure that the fans are safe and come out and have a good time. It's mandatory at all of our teams' home fields that you have to have licensed security. Okay, and even at my stadium, we have metal detector, and we have Kansas City, Missouri Police Department that come out to our games. So that's the change right there.
What type of safety rules as far as health for the players have you guys taken on?
Well, after we saw what happened with the incident with the Buffalo player, I now have a defibrillator that will be on the sideline with the rest of the equipment. We're also going to think about, because at one point some teams will have ambulance service right there on site. And then some teams, it just depends on what's the response time and how far are they from the hospital that determines that. But most teams now are starting to carry licensed trainers, whether it be that it's someone that's going to school and they need to get some volunteer hours and stuff like that. I've done that before and brought some people out. So, we're just purchasing more equipment, and you learn and make adjustments along the way. I don't believe in excuses. I believe in making adjustments.
Do you guys have any? Obviously, there's been huge concerns over concussions and CTE and things like that. What is your protocol policy in your respective league?
When the guy winds up coming out of a game, first of all, that was another thing that as far as emergency contact and information, all the players in our league, we had 600 players sign player agreements and register. Okay. And in that agreement, it has their emergency contact information. And also, too, it also states that we will send them. A lot of guys go, I don't want to go to the hospital. No, you're going, because I don't want to have to answer to someone's loved one. That person goes home and then goes to sleep, and we lose them. Okay, so they have to go. Okay, so that's one of the things that we put in the player agreement. And the player agreement just keeps getting longer, because every time when we witness something or think of something, and it's trying to get ahead of it, because you're on borrowed time and going, hey, I didn't think of that. Let me go ahead and add that.
Last question for me. What percentage would you say of the players, either on your roster or within the league, have some form of college experience?
There's an awful lot of guys that got college experience. But the problem is that a lot of the guys don't finish college.
Right.
And I know why, because you hear the same story over and over. The problem is that guys weren't used to, when they got out of high school and got to college, see, mama and dad or whoever isn't there to say, go to class.
Absolutely.
And they don't know how to manage their time.
Absolutely.
I hear stories where kids come to me and they want to play, and they say, the coach just didn't like me. He's getting paid to win. He's not there to like you. There's thousands behind you that's ready to take your place. So college coaches don't have time for that. What I believe is what makes me good is that, as far as coaching and dealing with my ball players, because I get all walks of life, and it doesn't matter if they're white, black, or Hispanic, or Indian. When they come play for me, a lot of them come from broken homes. The one thing that they're missing, they just want to be a part of something. You have to be bigger than they are, okay? Meaning that, okay, they're going to test you. And if you fail right off the bat, then you don't have their respect, and then they're going to be cancerous. So no matter how good they are, because a lot of coaches will sell their soul for victories and still keep cancers around, you have to be willing to say, get off my field, go home, or you're not part of this organization. And that's what I had to learn throughout the years. And by doing that, I understand what it means to, I'd rather sacrifice the few to save the many than try to cater to a few and lose them all. But with that being said, you have to know when to show empathy, okay? Because they come from broken homes. So it's a balancing act. And believe it or not, over a period of time, especially when you tell another man, I love you, and they're not used to hearing it because they never got that. And then as time passes and they go to respect you and they go, I love you too, coach. That's a good feeling. See, a lot of the times that people think that semi-pro is just as important as any other level, because I have many coaches like myself that have dealt with ball players from a long time ago, and they became good men of society. And I've had a few come back to me and say, Coach, I'll never forget what you said. You said if I quit out here, I'll quit on my family, I'll quit on my job, I'll quit on my kids. Coach, I'm married, I got 3 kids, and I work 2 jobs. I never forgot what you told me. And then you get that other guy that turns around, and then he's married, and then he has a decent job, and he comes back and says, babe, this is my coach. He saved my life. There's a lot of guys on the semi-pro level as owners and coaches that put more time in just the X's and O's and that care about these guys. They're saving lives, because if they're not part of the semi-pro gang, then they're part of the street gang.
Absolutely.
So,
That was always our rule. It's not about X's and O's, but it's about Jimmys and Joes.
Exactly. So we're finishing up. One more question. There's people that are watching and they want to contribute. They want to sponsor. How do they reach you?
you can look us up on Facebook, KC Panthers. Just KC Panthers on Facebook. Or Jimmy Ross. I'm on Facebook too. Oh, and don't forget to check out the league site too, gocmfl.com.
There you go. So, great show. Thank you for coming in. But we're still not done yet.
Okay.
We have the best segment of the show, and it's called Penny for Your Thoughts.
All right.
All right. Thank you guys for that. With that said, certainly we are excited that February is Black History Month. And so with that, we want to give a shout out to Bill Russell. Bill Russell, everybody knows him as this great winner and NBA champion, 11 NBA championships with the Boston Celtics, not only as a player, but his last one as a player coach. But most people don't realize how important a role that he played as a civil rights leader. Bill Russell was able to march with Dr. King. He led so many high-level protests and civil rights movements, despite the way he was treated in Boston, Massachusetts. Everybody would think just because that you are a winner that everything went smoothly for him in Boston,
Right.
but it didn't. But he was also one of the first guys to be at Muhammad Ali's side when he chose not to be inducted into the Army. And so in this day and age where athletes are now called on to have a political response, we want to give a shout out to Bill Russell, who was the original active major level champion athlete who had a political conscience. Rest in peace, Mr. Bill Russell.
Absolutely.
Yes.
One more thing. The Negro Leagues Baseball Museum has free entries because the Royals Charities, who Darwin is part of, he works for the Royals. So anybody who wants to go down and check the museum, it is a phenomenal museum. I am going to take my kids and grandkids down there one time this month, but it is free entry, so no excuses. Take some time, go down there, see the history of the Negro Leagues Baseball, because it is phenomenal. And with that, I am Brian Kress, the Awesome Voice, with Coach 24 Darwin Penny, George Walker, DJ Scatter, and Mr. Jimmy Ross. Be awesome, not angry, and you guys have yourself a phenomenal weekend.